Yo, what's up, folks? It's your boy Sports PSP. Hope everyone's enjoying the rest of their day. I want to talk about some NFL news regarding the NFL draft. I'm reading an article from Pro Football Talk from NBC Sports Peter King. You know, of course, everyone knows how great Peter King is as an NFL insider and reporter. And there's a report, according to Peter King, that the Houston Texans may not actually draft a quarterback with the second overall pick. Let me just read you from Pro Football Talk from Peter King. Houston Texans have to pick a quarterback, or do they? We're all we're all operating under the belief the Texans will pick a quarterback that Carolina leaves for them. I'm 90% on board with that. The Texans also picked 12th. With that pick and 2 first-round picks next year, is it impossible to think that they take the cleanest prospect in the draft, Alabama pass rusher Will Anderson at 2, and get their quarterback slightly lower, somewhere around the 4th pick or after? I think the Texans are going to go quarterback at 2. But in the last few days, I've heard this about Houston GM Nick Caserio. Very conservative. If he doesn't love a quarterback at 2, he's not going to force it. He'd rather take this year's sure edge thing, Anderson, the way Detroit took Aiden Hutchinson with the 2nd pick last year. Detroit got rewarded handsomely with a great rookie year from Hutchinson. It's a stretch, but I could see Nick taking Anderson, then using his 2nd first-round pick and trading back up to get his quarterback, one league personnel man said. Maybe I bet Indianapolis at 4 and Seattle at 5 would be okay with moving to 12 if it meant adding the better of those 2 first-rounders next year. Houston had his own one next year and Cleveland's one. But I still believe it's far more likely Houston stays at 2 and gives fans the long-term quarterback the franchise has been seeking since its inception in 2002. Owner Cal McNair will certainly want the quarterback at number 2, and Texans fans will be deflated if the loser of the Young/Stroud Stakes in Carolina isn't the pick at 2. Boy, that was an awful lot to read, so let me take to what Peter King said. Based on Nick Caserio, going back to his days in New England, and how conservative he is, he may lean towards Will Anderson. And look, if the Houston Texans, and it seems to me Carolina with the 1st overall pick, they're going to lean towards C.J. Stroud with the number 1 overall pick. Natural pocket passer, 6'3", 220, prototypical size compared to Bryce Young, who's 5'10", slightly over 200. Frank Reich, the current head coach of the Carolina Panthers, has a history of working with quarterbacks who are 6'3" and above, even though you can look at what he had in Seattle when they drafted Russell Wilson, undersized but selected in the 3rd round. No one really expected much from Russell Wilson when he was drafted. But the thing is, Houston, if they pass up on a quarterback, that'd be a dumb, stupid mistake on their part. Stupid. And this is not a knock on Will Anderson. The reason why it worked out for Detroit last year with Aiden Hutchinson coming out of Michigan with the 2nd overall pick, because that was a terrible quarterback class last year. That was a terrible quarterback class in the 2022 NFL draft. Let's not forget Kenny Pickett, who was the only quarterback selected in the 1st round. That was the only quarterback selected in the 1st round. If Will Anderson came out of last year's NFL draft, he would have easily been the 1st overall pick. Easily, unequivocally, because he was coming off a sensational season the year before last year with 17.5 sacks. Okay? Kenny Pickett was drafted with the 20th overall pick in last year's NFL draft. He was the only quarterback selected in the 1st round. And the NFL draft back in 2020, the Jaguars, they took Trayvon Walker out of Georgia with the number 1 overall pick. And Trayvon Walker only had 3.5 sacks. The only reason why a defensive player was taken with the #1 overall pick, it's actually been the first time a quarterback hasn't been selected since 2017, Myles Garrett, okay? The only reason why Detroit went with Aiden Hutchinson is because that quarterback class last year was sorry. You cannot use that with Will Anderson in this situation in 2023 because CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, two of the top quarterback prospects in this year's NFL draft. So if it's close between a top quarterback and a top pass rusher, of course I'm going to go with a top quarterback. In today's game, you're only going to go as far as your quarterback, okay? If it was a subpar, mediocre quarterback and a top pass rusher, then I would understand you go with Will Anderson. But you have to go with Bryce Young. It seems to me that the Panthers, they're going to go with CJ Stroud with the first overall pick. Bryce Young has to be the second overall pick. Houston needs a quarterback since they lost Deshaun Watson. The past 2 seasons without Deshaun Watson, Houston's record has been 7-26-1. Okay, in 2021, Deshaun Watson decided to sit out the entire season because he couldn't take it anymore with the Houston Texans organization. On top of that, off the field issues, Houston was 4-13. And then last year, they were 3-13-1. They have the second overall pick. They should draft a quarterback. And if you're telling me you want to go with Will Anderson over Bryce Young, are you saying that not because you like defense? Is it because of Bryce Young's size? Bryce Young, if Bryce Young were 6'3", 6'4", 230, or 220, if he were prototypical, would we even hear a report about the Houston Texans going with a pass rusher over Bryce Young? I mean, if the Houston Texans pass up on a quarterback in this year's draft class, this would be a dumb mistake. I'm not questioning the validity of the report of Peter King. Don't get me wrong. But the Texans, you better draft a quarterback. And especially for DeMeco Ryans, who's his first year as a head coach in the National Football League, okay? This is his first year as an NFL head coach. You got to give him a quarterback. You got to give him something to work to. Maybe you can say, hey, they probably want to go with Will Anderson because DeMeco Ryans is a defensive guy. He was a former defensive player in the NFL. He played with the Houston Texans. Before he took the head coaching job with the Houston Texans, he was the defensive coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers. Look, they got to go with Bryce Young. They got to go with either Stroud or Young. I believe Stroud's going to be the first overall pick, but they got to go with Bryce Young if Bryce Young is available. I understand teams are reluctant in Bryce Young because of his size. He's 5'10", 204, but still, Bryce Young is one of the top quarterback prospects. I believe Bryce Young has the higher upside than CJ Stroud because I think he's more athletic. He makes better throws outside the pocket. I think he has more potential. I'm not passing up on Bryce Young for a pass rusher. So for me, top quarterback, top pass rusher, if I'm a GM, I'm taking the quarterback, especially in today's game. So I think that they got to go with Bryce Young. But anyway, those are my thoughts, folks. What do you make of the report from Peter King? Do you think that Houston would make a big mistake passing up on a quarterback, whether it's CJ Stroud or Bryce Young, for Will Anderson? If the Texans make this choice, what do you make of it, and much more? Other than that, it's your boy Sports PSP. Hope everyone's enjoying the rest of their day, and God bless.